If you're interested in bite-sized body art information, I welcome you. My name is John Johnson, and I'm your host. Please see Session 0 for disclaimers. I've done a decent amount of public speaking, some at events you might consider pretty big, and some you might consider pretty small. It's not something I intentionally pursued, it just kind of started happening, and in time I became comfortable speaking in front of others, and opportunities came more frequently. I'm really grateful that some of my closest colleagues in the body piercing industry are also speakers and other educators. They're each a good influence and inspiring. This session is composed with event organizers in mind and anyone who might have the opportunity to be a speaker. I'll start with the organization. Who's hosting the event? It's important for a speaker to be aware of the mission and the values of the people they're speaking for and speaking to. I've spoken to students at colleges, nurses groups, dental hygienists, piercers and tattooers, studio owners, health inspectors, and other officials. Each of these are very different audiences. For presenters, on whose behalf are you speaking? I speak most often on behalf of the Association of Professional Piercers. When that's the case, I must stick to the mission of the APP, which limits my presentations to body piercing topics. So, who's your audience? If you're speaking to health inspectors, you need to tailor your content to attendees that think in terms of environmental health and regulations. You'll need to use language that isn't so specific to body art that they can't follow along, and be familiar with the regulations they enforce. If you're speaking to an audience of body artists, are they all working under the same regulations? If not, then discussing health codes might not be as practical unless it's a simple reference or example that helps you make a point. Also, what's the experience level of the audience? You'll want to know this as you design your presentation. The topics we cover in our presentations should be decided before any agreements are made. The organizers want a qualified speaker, and a speaker, of course, wants to do a great job for their audience. From my experience, event organizers often don't really know the specifics of what they need, only that they need a body art educator. I'll suggest a handful of topics as examples so they can get some ideas, and I almost always ask them to survey the people likely to be attendees and ask where they feel the information gaps are. Knowing what the audience wants to learn is the best way to design a great presentation. I'm personally impressed every time an organizer actually sends out a survey to their community. Are there other body art speakers? If you're one of 2 or more body art speakers at an event, I suggest contacting the others and discussing your content for overlap. It could be awkward if speakers contradict each other and may affect how your presentations are perceived by attendees. If it's an event with several body art speakers, you can get away with reaching out to only the ones delivering similar topics as you and make sure you know what your differences are and you can address them professionally. The number of presentations matters. If the event is in 3 months, and you're expected to speak only once, then you have 3 months to create and rehearse your presentation. But if you're speaking twice, then you need to do double the work. If you're an organizer, how long do you want the sessions? 45 minutes? 60 minutes? Make sure this is made clear, and if your speaker should expect Q&A to be a part of that time limit. 10 minutes of Q&A means a 45-minute presentation is actually only 35 minutes of content. If there is Q&A, is it submitted digitally through an app? Is someone there to monitor that besides the speaker? Or is the speaker fielding questions from raised hands in the room? In the early stages of event planning, when it's first being decided to host some body art sessions, the dates or even location of the event haven't necessarily been locked in. Not only do speakers need to know what they're being asked to speak on, they need to know when. My suggestion is to not ask someone to be a speaker until you can tell them the specific dates you'd like to have them there. An event might be 3 or 4 days, and you might want someone to speak twice about body art. If both their sessions are on the same day, that may be appreciated. But if the dates of their speaking engagements change, it's pretty important to let them know. If they have to make travel arrangements and budget for flights, hotels, and time off work, it might be a hardship if their speaking schedule is inefficient. When working out the schedule, event planners should consider jet lag. If a speaker has an early morning session after arriving only the evening before, especially if they arrive late at night, the following morning might be a bad time to speak, especially if there's a time zone difference that doesn't work in their favor. An 8 a.m. session in Eastern Standard Time is 5 a.m. for someone who came from the Pacific Standard Time Zone. This is the halfway point of this episode, and I appreciate you listening. To hear the rest, please subscribe to the Discussions in Body Art podcast on Patreon. This has been the Discussions in Body Art podcast. Thanks for listening. Questions, comments, and suggestions can be forwarded to john@newflowerstudio.com. If you enjoy my content, suggest this podcast to your peers. Subscribe on Patreon for my exclusive content and visit newflowerstudio.com/NFW/podcast to learn more.